John, so I'd love to start. So the sanctuary thing is a big issue because one of the cool things about our team is we're actually based out of Texas.
Okay.
And one of your last shots of your film showcases how much this issue is a part of that state in particular.
Yeah.
But I want to start with, how did you meet this council member? How did this story come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, this is a co-direction with Julius Ramba, who couldn't be here, but we had started talking about doing a project together, and we're always interested in stories that kind of tap into what we're seeing in society and across the country, but how we can tell those in a really intimate, personal way. And I stumbled across this. Lebanon wasn't the first sanctuary city I found, but I was reading an article about where some city where this legislation had been placed on the docket and hadn't passed, and started researching, and then found the story of Krista's story, where she had done a couple interviews and a couple articles talking about her decision to resign and her perception of this policy. And so I just reached out to her, and one of the first things she said, and then she and Julia and I did several phone conversations, but on those she said, I've been looking for a way to tell this story for a long time. And that's, I think, encouraging to hear as a filmmaker. It's also some weight and some added responsibility felt to tell the story honestly and truthfully and respectfully, but that's something you should always be doing too. And so we started having conversations, and eventually decided to do a trip there and film and work to tell her story.
How quickly did you come across her storm chasing, storm watching? How did that kind of fold in? I love that element to the story.
Yeah. Honestly, she told us about that in our kind of pre-conversations, but it wasn't until we kind of thought, okay, it'd be cool to film you doing some of this storm spotting work, just to kind of speak to how you're serving your community now, or your continued dedication to this community public service. But it wasn't until really in the course of after filming and kind of getting the footage of that really dramatic shot of the storm rolling into town, that we kind of thought, well, maybe this can also be a larger metaphor for kind of the threats that Krista perceived with this sanctuary city for the Unborn movement and this policy, right? And it can be a larger metaphor for kind of this storm coming and passing, and kind of Krista staying there and continuing to be a presence in the community despite that.
Is there any way, do you have any updates from the film? Like, can you give us anything from the film to right now?
So updates kind of like policy-wise, or
Are they still a sanctuary city? Is that all? They
still are. There's been some kind of, they've had to clarify some language due to some lawsuits, and so I think they've since, they're still a sanctuary city for the Unborn, but some of the policy charging people for aiding and abetting has been reduced a bit, but they still have that sanctuary city status. And one of the things we wanted to tap into with this film too is just this kind of like patchwork degree of access or of rights depending on where you live, and I think that's happening statewide and also happening at the city level too. And Ohio does have a referendum coming up in November statewide for abortion access, abortion rights to be constitutional right in the state. And so that's kind of something that these folks in Lebanon, who folks like Krista, I think are involved in and are hoping for codifying those rights.
Do you mind if we talk about that bigger idea? Because it's obviously something that is spreading across the nation. Like we mentioned earlier, Texas is kind of leading the way. It has the majority of the sanctuary cities of Unborn. What is this? I mean, it's a lot of this are city councils or small government. And explain more, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think central to the film is this idea of home. And even the title Sanctuary, I think, has kind of a double meaning too, of, this being Krista's home that she's known her entire life. And I think what we're seeing is across the country, these city councils, school boards, all these local government bodies are kind of becoming places where national political fights are being held. And I think, it's a tough reality to look at, because in some senses, maybe local government should be more involved in those issues, right? Maybe it should be a space where we don't, pretend that these forces aren't happening, but also it results in Krista is someone where she talks about seeing city council and seeing public service at that local level as being about infrastructure and budget, and that kind of being lost, right? And now it's the space where, it mentioned kind of in terms of, in order to contextualize this larger evolution, the policies on guns and denying a human relations commission and all these things. So I think it's something we're seeing statewide, and it's, I think it's, the film we tried to make it very personal and intimate and focus on one person's experience. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people can relate to, right? The town that they call home, maybe they've always lived there, maybe they've only lived there for a few years, but now it's becoming a space where these larger battles are being held at the most local level. And I think it challenges people's perception of those spaces. And it also, but there's the counterpoint too, where, Krista doesn't want to leave, right? There's still some tie to this space too. And I think, our country is more complex than red states and blue states. I think there are blue cities and red rural areas. I think there are people who defy both of those categorizations in all of those spaces, right? So, yeah.
I don't want to give it away, but one of the kind of big moments in the film is obviously the speech she gives and what she says in particular, which I think gets to what you're talking about, the purpose of these types of entities. What do you hope people gain from seeing this film? Is it knowledge of the changing of the councils? Is it her fight and will to continue to hold on to it? I mean, what do you want people to gain from your film?
Yeah, I think awareness is something that we want people to get from this film, like awareness of, the influence you can have at the local government level, right? Like what, Krista, we've continued to talk with her, and, is hopeful that at some point they get someone, or they get a council where a lot of people are more focused on let's do the things that are most pressing for our community, right? Like let's balance the budget, or make sure our infrastructure is up to speed, and all of those things, right? So I think that awareness is certainly key, but I think it also shows, Krista, I think, is such a strong messenger for this issue, because she's a firefighter, a paramedic, EMT. She's responded to calls and responded to situations where someone was fearful about revealing their pregnancy, or wasn't sure where to go for abortion access, or was fearful of the responses that would be had there. And she's seen that up close and personal. And I think, sometimes we think of these issues just in terms of, this is my position and I'm on this side or I'm on this side. And we don't listen to people who have, experienced the fallout of a lack of access, right, to these rights. And so I hope it's a chance to listen to someone like Krista, who through 30 years of public service and beyond, right, has encountered these issues up close and personal. And I think we can't ignore that.
What does it mean to showcase it here at Tallgrass, a community that I think can gain a lot from this knowledge? Yeah, absolutely. Well, we really, I think this is a film that's, I think, relevant in a lot of places. And I think, Tallgrass is such a, I think, important voice for independent filmmaking and independent stories, right? And I think, you could see similarities. Julia and I are both from the Midwest and from like the heartland, and there's a lot of stories in this region, I think, that tell us a lot about national identity and tell us a lot about the issues that we're facing as a country, right? So it's really important to showcase it in towns and cities that might be grappling with these same challenges at some point. And so, and also the folks at Tallgrass are just, a great team of people who I think really value putting on a independent and filmmaker focused festival where
we get to engage with audiences and talk about some of the issues embedded in these films too.
Did you just screen?
Yeah. Just screened this morning. Yeah.
What was it like?
It was great. It was, a fantastic lineup of short documentaries, dealing with, a variety of issues and different visual approaches too, and sonic approaches to treating those issues. So it was great, and the chance to do a Q&A and answer some of the questions that people had, and just speak with people after, and it's awesome to be able to do that and talk about the films and see people's responses in a theater too, right? Yeah. And see the moments that you can kind of feel, a collective breath, right? Or like a release of tension, or a laugh, or or moments that are really still and calm too. So it's a beautiful experience to be able to do that.
Very cool. Can you share with us where people can find more about this film, but also work that you guys are doing, and where we can learn more? Yeah,
absolutely. So right now we're just housing the film on, or the information about the film on my website, so johnhaleyfilms.com. Julia and I are both on Instagram though, and we're hoping to keep, I think, collaborating too and do more work. So and we have some screenings coming up at festivals like New Hampshire and St. Louis and Santa Fe and a couple others. So we're excited to keep showing the film in other spaces too, Virginia too, and a couple others. So anyone who's in those communities or nearby can also catch the film at those festivals too. And we're keeping a list too of all the festivals it'll be screening at on that website too.
Well, John, I really loved watching your doc. I think it's an important one. I loved meeting Krista. She's such a dynamic person, and it's such a tricky subject. So I love that you guys touched upon it in such a intelligent way. There wasn't an agenda, I felt, and that was appreciative. So thank you for making the film.
Thank you so much for watching it.
Yeah.